Signorie, how to set up and play. So we're going to play lords of renowned families in Renaissance Italy, known as signores. Our goal is to strengthen the influence of our families among the 6 most prestigious houses of Italy. We do so by making strategic use of our families, our sons and our daughters, solving diplomatic missions, engaging in strategic marriages, all for the benefit and glory of our family. The game will take place over 7 rounds, and at the end of that, most VPs win. To set up the game, give every player a player board. They'll also have a supply of male family members, female family members, potential brides to marry their sons to, and helpers. So just create a supply. Each player will start the game with 4 male family members, 3 female family members, and 5 florins. You'll also have 3 markers, so randomly determine player order. Let's say blue was first in turn order, so put the discs on the current turn order track. Stack all discs on the initiative track based on the turn order, and then put all discs on spot 0 of the scoring track. Based on the turn order, players will get additional florins. The first player will get 1 additional florin, 2 additional florin, also 2 additional florins, and then the 4th player would get 3 additional florins, plus 1, plus 2, plus 2, plus 3. So since blue is first, they'll start with a total of 6 florins. To set up the main board, we'll lay out the 5 offspring dice. These will get rolled in the game when a player takes the correct action. We'll also set up the different action dice. We use dice based on the number of players. So number of dice, 1 die for each player in the game in each of the 5 colors. So since this is a 4-player game, we're playing with 4 dice in each color. If this was a 2-player game, we'd only be using 2 dice in each color. At the start of each of the rounds in the game, we would roll all these dice and put them in their color column. Next, we'll lay out the assignment tiles. This also happens at the start of every round. There's 10 assignment tiles. They get shuffled, and they randomly get placed in each of these spots at the beginning of each round. So here was the random distribution for the first round. All 10 got put into a spot. Next, we'll do the reward tiles. You'll sort them into 2 stacks, plain backs and shield backs. Shuffle both stacks. The shield backs are for the last round and second to last round of the game. So reveal those. The remaining ones will not be used this game. Do the same with the plain back, and we'll deal 5 of these randomly. And these will be a reward at the end of each round. These stay like this for the entire game. Again, the ones we don't use will not be used this game. Next, we prepare the family alliance tiles. There's 6 different Italian families. There's 9 in each stack. So normally you would just shuffle all of these together and place them on the cities. The rules say in a 3-player game, you randomly remove 1 from each family stack, and in a 2-player game, you remove 2 tiles randomly from each stack before placing them. The tiles range in victory points from as low as 2 to as high as 5 throughout each stack. So I've shuffled them all together now. All the alliance tiles are shuffled together, and I've randomly drawn 2 for each of the 5 cities in Italy. Venice, Milan, Firenze, Rome, and Napoli. 2 alliance tiles for each city. And you'll see each city has a female alliance tile that you gain through marriages and a male alliance tile that you get through solving missions. The rules also say for a 3-player game, you completely don't use 1 city. And for a 2-player game, you block off 2 cities, and you'd only play for 3. In a 4-player game, you use all 5 cities. In a 3-player game, you can remove 1, and in a 2-player game, you can remove 2 cities. Now what will happen is as tiles get taken at the beginning of each round, only the empty spots will get refilled from the supply. In lower player count games, some people find that creates some staleness with the tiles on the board. So a couple of variants that people play with, they'll either play with just all the regions open, or a more common one is instead of just filling the empty spots, they'll refresh all spots at the beginning of each new round to create fresh tiles. So the game is played over 7 rounds, each marked with these reward tiles at the end of each round that you can be eligible for. Basically what happens is you do round setup, and then you take actions, up to 4 actions, and then you see if you're eligible for the bonuses. In round setup, you refill the tiles, like we talked about. You will shuffle all the assignment tiles and replace them at the beginning of each round, and you'll roll all the dice each round. So those 3 things: alliance tiles, assignment tiles, and dice. Play then starts in the action phase. You'll go in turn order based on the turn order track, and what a player does is they select one of the available dice, they place it on their player board, and they take one of the available actions. Now the core concept in the game is you're trying to balance the number of pips you take on the dice. These represent you exerting your influence over your family and the country of Italy. So if I was to take a yellow dice, it has to go in the yellow column. So these are corresponding to their color. And then what the yellow column requires is that if I use a value of 1, I don't have to pay any additional florins. Anything I'm short, I've got to pay additional florins. If I was to use a 3 here, I'm fine. I need a minimum of 1, so I've overpaid, I'm fine. On the second one, those are all fine. Actually, you'll see this is a 4. So again, I've overpaid, no problem. So we got a good roll here. Now here, if I use this purple one, you can see I'm short. It requires a minimum of 3. So to place this here, I would need to supplement my influence with florins. I would need 2 florins plus the die to do the action of 3. Here, I would need 3 additional florins to supplement that action. Again, if I'm over, no problem, I can take the action. I can take any one I choose for any spot on the board. Keep in mind, I can only take each color only once during the round. So if I was to take this purple action, and everyone takes their turn, on my next turn, I could no longer take the purple die because it's filled the spot. I can only take 1 per color during the round. Also, I'm only allowed to take a maximum of 4 actions during the round. So there will always be at least 1 color I didn't take. I could always pass before that, so I don't have to take 4 dice. And we'll talk about why you'll do that based on the values. So you can see why you'd want to take high dice, because it avoids you from having to pay florins or extra money to supplement your actions. But also, you're trying to take low dice because at the end of the round, if you can keep your total dice total at 13 or less, you qualify for these end of round bonuses, and they're very powerful. So in this case, I've taken the equivalent of 14 value dice. I've kind of overexerted my influence. I won't be eligible for this. So I've got to be very cautious about, by the end of the round, remember I can take up to 4 of these. So here, I've got a total of, well, still too high. There. 1, 7, 8, 11. So I've qualified for the end of round bonus, but it came at a slight cost. I had to pay 3 florins to use that action. I had to pay an extra 2 florins to use that action. That was fine, and that was fine. And since you always set up the game with 1 die per player, you always know that you'll always at least have 1 die in each of the columns reserved for you. So even if the other 3 players took their yellow actions, you would be left with 1 yellow die for the yellow column action if you needed it. Now, it may not be the value you want, but you know there's at least 1 reserved for every player. So let's talk about the different actions you can take. When you take a die and place it in one of these columns, it gives you the ability to do one of 3 things. You can send your family on assignment. You can see each of the spots. You can send your family on assignment, and that corresponds to the color up here. So there's 2 different types of assignments each round, and these were shuffled, so this will change. We'll talk about that. You could also hire a helper, or you could take the specific Signorie action associated with that column. And each one has a different Signorie action. So let's first talk about the helper action. So if on my first move I was able to take that, I wouldn't have to pay any extra florins. And I decide instead of the Signorie action or the assignment action, I'm going to take the helper action. So I can hire a helper and place a helper in the gray column. Here, if I put a dice here, I could put a helper in the purple column. So you could see it's always you're putting a helper in the column that came before. If I was to select here and take the helper action, it would allow me to put a helper in the turquoise column. So here I come here, I'm going to hire a helper, so I can pick any of the helpers in the gray column. So let's say I pick this one, and I have to pay 2 florins to hire that helper. That's his salary. But now he'll help me for the rest of the game whenever I come here. These helpers basically give you free bonus actions whenever you take or select a dice in that column. So let's say I did that on the first turn. On my next turn, I grab a gray, place it there. I can still take the assignment, another helper action, or this action. In addition, once I complete this, all of these bonuses will trigger. And we'll cover each of these bonuses specifically, but you can see this is an easy one. I get 3 additional florins. So if I had helpers in both these and took this action, I would get all 3 of these bonus actions. So taking the helper action on your turn doesn't give you any immediate benefits, but what it does is it builds an engine for later turns when you select the dice. You're getting additional benefits. So now let's talk about each of the specific Signorie actions for each column, and then we'll talk about the assignment actions. So for this column, easy. If I decide, I can take the Signorie action and get 3 florins. Now remember, I can't do multiple. I got to select either the assignment, the helper, or the Signorie action. That's easy, 3 florins. Let's skip that one and go to here. Let's say that was the only dice available, so I've got to pay a florin just to place it. My Signorie action is I get to have offspring. Now this is based on the number of married men in my family. I get to roll the offspring dice. So I'm going to look over here. These are the men in my family. This is me. To start the game, I am the only one that's married. That's printed on the board. In subsequent rounds during the bonus phase, if I qualify, I can marry off additional sons. And so maybe I'd marry him into a future round. So if I took this action and I had 2 males married in my family, I could roll 2 of the offspring dice. And then based on the roll, I would get new family members. On a 1, 2, or 3, I get a female, and then a 4, 5, or 6, I get a male to my family. So I got a female and a male in my family. Those come straight from my supply and get immediately added to my family. So that's the offspring action. To start the game, if you take that action, you can only roll 1 dice because that's the only male in your family you have married. Let's skip this one for now and cover this one. So if I was to select that action, this allows me to train the men in my family. Basically, I can move up these 4 tracks on the right side of the board. And I can move them up in any way I choose using 4 points. So the book represents the initiative track. This determines turn order at the end of each round. So I could use all 4 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that would be the use of that. You can see as you get higher on the initiative track at the end of the round, you can score victory points based on where you landed. You could also send your men off to train. So this represents political training, this represents religious training, and this represents military training in each of the tracks. And basically what you do is you take a male member of your family that you currently have, and you can place them on these tracks. And you could spend the 4 points any way you like. It costs 1 point to put a new male member on the track, and it costs 1 point for each level you bring them up. So you could spend those 4 points by putting 1 male member at the start of each track, and then maybe you want to move your initiative track up 1, because you can see there's the book symbol there too, as well as the 3 training tracks. Instead of doing that, maybe you put 1 on each track and you just decide to move him up 1. So that was 4 points that you spent, 1 for each and then 1 to move up. You may decide, maybe you just want to focus on one of your son's training. So you put him there for 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's the action. You'll notice that whenever a male member gets to this spot, you can immediately collect 2 florins. If on a later turn you got him all the way up here, you can immediately take an advancement on the initiative track. That's the book symbol. And as a reminder again, as you move up the initiative track at the end of the round, the higher you get, you can actually score points each round for advancing far on the initiative track. It also determines turn order at the beginning of each round. There's also no limit to how many people you could have on an existing track. So I may decide to spend all 4 points putting 2 guys on this track and moving them both up 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. If that's the track you want to focus on. So we skipped this one, so let's cover this one now. So when you take the red column action, the Signorie action is to marry one of the females in your family, one of your daughters or your granddaughters, off into a strategic marriage. So you have to have at least a female in your supply, and then you can choose where you would like to marry them off in any of the available cities. And there's a couple things that will drive your decision. You always have to put them into the lowest spot. So to start the game, all the lowest spots will be available. And then based on the spot you put them in, that's the minimum dowry you have to pay. So here I have to pay 1 dowry, but I can pay up to 4. The reason why you'd want to pay more is for each florin you pay, you immediately get 2 victory points on the score track. So I could place her here, and I decide I'm going to pay 3 florins for 6 victory points. Also, I can take the alliance tile for the female side of the city and place it here into my strategic alliance track. You'll see this symbol indicates that I'm only ever allowed to have 1 of each tile in this area. So let's say I took this one and I decided to put her there, and I put there, and then on a subsequent turn I do another strategic marriage and I put her there and I pay the dower and I get victory points. I could not take this tile because I already have that tile. I can only have different tiles here. This is important because at the end of the game you will actually score victory points for each of the tiles. So for each of the strategic marriages that you've arranged, only if you have 3 or more. So if I only collected 2 tiles throughout the game, I wouldn't score any of them. I'm only going to score tiles if I have 3 or more, but then I would score all the tiles. If I was able to get 5 tiles here, let's say I was able to get all 6 unique strategic marriages, I would score all 6. And then finally, it is possible to come here, do the marriage, pay the dowry, get the victory points, and just not be able to take the tile. You can still do that. So this is a good way to get victory points throughout the game by sending your daughters and granddaughters off to marriages, because if you pay the maximum 4 florins, you can get 8 victory points for each marriage you arrange. You'll also notice that there could be bonuses at the end of the round that give you bonuses for male and female figures you actually have on the board. All right, the final Signorie action. So if I was to come there, I could send one of my male family members to solve a diplomatic crisis that one of the cities in Italy is facing. Now, I can't send a male from my supply. They would have had to have been trained to solve one of those missions. So you can only take someone, a male, that you've been grooming on your track. So let's assume on a previous turn, maybe I use that action to move him up and get him some training, and now I want to send him off to solve a mission. So what you do is you first have to make sure and check what rank they have. So you can see he's progressed, so he has a level 2 rank. If he was up here, he'd have a level 3 rank. If he got to this row, a level 4 rank. And that's the highest. Now what that means is that since he has a level 2 rank, he can be placed in any spot 2 or below. He couldn't go into a 3 because he hasn't been trained that sufficiently. Keep in mind, he always has to go on the lowest spot that he can fit, but he at least has to meet the minimum skill level or the rank to solve the mission. Any type of training can solve the mission, but you'll see why that's important. Okay, so to recap, the first thing you do to send a man on a diplomatic mission is you pull him off one of the training tracks. You'll instantly score bonus points based on the spot you pull him off. So if I pull him off here, I will get 4 points immediately on the scoring track. So you can see the more training they have, if I pulled him from this spot, I would get 13 points immediately. Next, you send him to a city to solve the crisis and just make sure he can meet the minimum rank. So he has a rank of 2, so he can come here. And then he immediately takes the tile if he's eligible for it. So what do we mean by that? So the same way marriages work, you get to place that tile based on what type of training you used to solve the crisis. So since he came off the politics track, he used political training to solve the crisis. So I can take that tile from the right side, the male side, and place it into my political track. And you see I could do that because this board requires one of these. Every player board has a different mix of all these different things. So on a future diplomatic mission, I could not take another one of these tiles. I would have, if I used political training, I would have to find one of these. Now, if I pulled someone off of religious training, these are the tiles I'm looking for. And just like the strategic marriages, these will score at the end of the game if you're able to get at least 3 in the row. And that goes for all these. So one final point. To solve a crisis, remember you can use any of the tracks. You get the points. And let's say that was the only one available to solve. This tile does not match my political training, which was the track I pulled him off of. So I can still solve the crisis. I can still earn the victory points from the spot I pulled him off of, but I just can't get this tile because I couldn't put it there. And then keep in mind, I could only ever have 2 of that color, 1 of that one, and 1 of that one. You'll see there's a way to get generic ones later. Alright, so we've talked about all the helper actions. We've talked about all the Signorie actions. Let's talk about the assignment action. So if I take this, I can send some of my family members on assignment to accomplish a mission. And again, the colors correspond to these assignment spots up here. So the yellow column, I could send my females on assignment to accomplish this mission, or my males on assignment to accomplish this mission. And basically what this means is I will be discarding those family members out of my supply to accomplish this mission. So the number, I can take either the female or the male. This number indicates how many family members I need to discard to accomplish this. So in this case, if I discard 2 females, I can take this action, which is a strategic marriage action. You can see it matches that. Here, I could use 2 males to send one of my males on a diplomatic mission, like we just talked about. Now keep in mind that these shuffle every round. So next round, it may be like this. I have to send 2 female to do that, or this might be in a different column. But this is the number of family members you need to expend. That's the number you need to expend to take the action, and this indicates you can only do it once. So 2 males to send 1 female into a strategic marriage. This tile means you can send 1 family member, in this case a female, to get a generic alliance tile. So basically, discard 1 female, and you just take randomly from the supply, and then you can immediately place it on your board. So remember, you need at least 3 to score. So this helps you get some generic ones to help you meet that minimum requirement. And at the end of the game, it'll at least count towards 1 victory point, and you could still count your others. So you could have both those, that one, and an unlimited number of the generic tiles. So these can help you satisfy the requirements. This one allows you to turn in family members, here male family members, up to 3 times to get a family member of your choice. So this is a great way if you have too many males in your family, maybe all your women are bearing sons and you need females, you could turn in 3 males to get 3 females. The ... indicates the number of times you can take this action. So if you turned in 1 male, you could get 1 female or male. Or if you turned in 2, you could get it 2. This one is pretty straightforward. It's just money. So you can turn in up to 3 family members that match for 2 florins each. Here's an interesting one. This allows you to turn in up to 3 family members, in this case males, and you would put them down here, and it gives you a +3 on your bonus requirement for the end of the round. So you'll remember you have to be 13 or less. If you send a male figure here through that action, now you could be 16 or less to qualify for the end of round bonus. So you could send up to 3 and get an additional 3 threshold on that requirement. Here you can send up to 3 family members for 2 advancements on the initiative track. Here you can send up to 3 for each would give you 2 advancements on the religious track. Here you can send up to 3 family members, each for 2 advancements on the political track, and 3 members for 2 advancements on the military track. So just to recap the assignment action, you place the dice like normal, and then you take the assignment action, and that corresponds to the color up here. So the most important thing about the assignment track is paying attention to whether you need females or males and making sure you have them in your supply, and how many times you can do the action. So this one you would have to have at least 2 females, and you only get to perform this action once, sending a male on a diplomatic mission. Here you need 1, and you can only do it once. On these you can do it up to 3 times for each one you consume. Alright, now let's cover all of the different helper bonuses that you can get. So you'll remember this helper action allowed you to hire assistants by paying the cost and putting those workers there. So on subsequent rounds, any spot where you have a worker and you take this action, you trigger all the bonuses where you have helpers. Now it's important to keep in mind you've got to complete this main action first, one of those 3, before these trigger. So let's look at each of these. This helper would let you send 1 male on a diplomatic mission as normal from the track, but he could only take a generic tile after completing it. He could not take the city tile. He would go into the spot as normal, but he'd get a generic 1 tile from the supply and add it to his board. Here lets you get 3 movements on each of the 3 training tracks. You'll notice there's no book, so you can't move up the initiation or the initiative track, just the other ones. You get 3 movement points. Here you get to move up the initiative track based on the die value you play. So if you played a 1 yellow, you can only move up the initiative track 1 spot. If you played a 6, you could literally move up 6 times up the initiative track. And you'll notice some helpers are more expensive. But the nice thing is once you pay the helper, that's his salary for the entire game. And then you get the benefit of the action. Here, immediately, you would get, every time you trigger this action, 1 victory point for every male you have out into the cities. Here, you'd immediately get to roll 1 offspring dice and take the result, either a female or a male. And then here, just like this, you'd get to move up the political training track based on the value of the die you play. This helper lets you move up instantly 3 on the initiative track. You'll notice it doesn't matter on the value of the die. It's always 3. You get to move up the initiative track. Here, instantly gives you a generic tile from the supply. And you just take it and immediately place it on one of your tracks. So just 1 tile. Here lets you move up the religious track up to 6 times based on the value of the die. Here just gives you 3 florins instantly. Here gives you 1 family member instantly. It's your choice, either a male or a female. You get a pick, just add them into your immediate family. And then here lets you move up the military track, 1 to 6 based on the die you play. Here lets you immediately send a female into a strategic marriage. All the normal rules apply. You pay your dowry, you get your victory points, but you can't take the specific city tile. Again, you would just get a generic tile and add it specifically to your marriage track. Here, this helper would give you instantly 3 points whenever you came here. And this helper is nice. This would let you do 1 assignment action. You'll notice that matches that, but it's multicolored. So you can do any 1 assignment action on the board. A restriction, though, is you can see you can only use 1 female or male. So if you're using the actions that allow you to do multiple, you only get the 1. So you'd only get 2 florins. These require at least 2. So you could not even do these because it's only saying you can only send 1 male or female on the assignment. Alright, we've covered all the actions in the game. Let's talk about the end of round bonuses. So at the end of the round, when every player has passed, and keep in mind if you've used 4 dice, you have to pass because you cannot take more than 4 actions. There's no benefit to passing. We'll come down here, and actually the first thing we do before we do bonuses is we'll set the new turn order track. So based on where players are on the initiative track, they'll immediately score those victory points, and then this will determine the new player order. So blue, purple, yellow, red, blue, purple, yellow, red. So it stayed the same, and then everyone resets back down to 0 for the next round. Then we evaluate if everyone has stayed under 13 or less, and keep in mind you may have played using an assignment action to raise your limit, so as long as you're under your limit, you qualify for the bonus. You can take 3 florins or the reward associated with this round. So this is the first round, second round, third round, fourth round, fifth round. After you take the reward, and we'll cover all of these in depth because there's some that don't get used in the game. Once you get the reward, you can immediately also marry one of the males in your family. And you'll remember, you'll just take a bride and you'll put him, he's your firstborn son, so now you're married and he's married. So that can happen every round if you qualify for the bonus. This bride comes with a dowry of 2. So you would get to marry another one of your sons and you would get 2. you'll notice you have the chance to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 brides, but you only have 4 sons to marry. So once you max them out, then you just wouldn't take that bride. If you are able to marry off this son and this son, you can see immediately you would get 2 victory points and 5 victory points. At the end of the last round and the second last round, instead of getting a bride, you have the option of turning in 5 florins for 5 victory points. And you can do this in this round and this round. One time, 5 florins for 5 victory points. So once everyone who's eligible has taken their bonus, either the 3 florins or the round bonus, and the bride, or this as we get later in the game, once everyone's taken their reward, then we set up for the new round. We replace empty tiles in the cities. We reshuffle all the assignment tiles and place them brand new. And everyone, we re-roll all the dice and place them in the selection area. And then we start the next round based on the new turn order. Also at the end of the round, you'll just kind of flip this over to indicate that that round's complete. And then any meeples that were here just get discarded. Any meeples used on assignment actions get discarded. Those were just placed here to remind you when the bonus score came that you had additional points. So let's cover all the potential end of round bonus rewards, and then you'll be ready to start. So these are all the generic ones that go on the first 5 rounds of the game. This bonus would immediately give you two male members into your family. This would give you 2 female members into your family. This would let you immediately, right then and there, send a male on a diplomatic mission. Keep in mind, this will be based on the new turn order. So in turn order, the first player who earned this bonus would be able to execute it first, and that could make a difference in terms of taking tiles. Here lets you send a female on into a strategic marriage. This lets you move up 3 on the initiative track. Here gives you 5 advancement points on the training tracks. Here gives you a generic 1 victory point tile that you can add to your tableau. This lets you immediately hire a worker free of charge, so you can place a white disc anywhere on your helpers free of charge. Here's an interesting one. So immediately everyone gets to take an extra action. So you would clear off any dice that you have on your board, and you'll remember there'll at least be certain dice left here, because not everyone can take all 5 of their dice. So in turn order, every player would take a action dice and immediately play it on their board and execute the action. Keep in mind the bonuses are executed before the round gets reset and extra tiles come in, or extra assignment tiles, or the dice get re-rolled. Here are the tiles for the second to last round and the last round. They give you victory point rewards. So here's 2 victory points for every male you have anywhere in the cities. 2 victory points for every female. 4 victory points for every city where you at least have 1 male. And 4 victory points for every city you at least have 1 female. So there's 5 cities on the board. So a maximum here would be 20 points for each of these if you had a male in every city or a female in every city. These are every single male on the board would get you 2 victory points. And the final one here is you would get 2 victory points immediately when this bonus is scored for every worker, every assistant you've hired and have on your board. At the end of the final round, you'll do final scoring. Basically, you'll take your position on the score track and you'll add a couple things. Any male you had left on the training track, you can score half the victory points, rounded down. So if he was here, you could get 2 points. If you had one all the way up here, you could get 3 points. And then you score all of your tiles here in each row where you at least have 3 tiles. And then add those up, add those to your score track. Most victory points is the winner. A couple other variants that people play with is they tighten up this area. So once anyone takes a specific assignment action, it becomes unavailable to all other players. Makes this really tight. Also, to loosen this up, if all the spots are taken, they do allow players to play outside they would just have to pay the highest value. So they'd have to pay the 4 dowry for female, or they'd have to have a rank of 4 for males going on diplomatic missions. And that should be everything you need to set up and play Signorie.